Welcome to part 2 of our cloud overview, where the topic is our redirect feature that is a part of our basic and standard subscription plans. You may be familiar with the redirect service that Patton has offered for years. Used by a lot of customers, the service would tell a device, after it had phoned home to Patton, so to speak, where to connect to get its configuration file. This redirect functionality has now been migrated to the cloud. In addition, we have also added additional features that help customers in different scenarios to distribute configurations to all their devices. So let's have a quick overview of what's possible. What are the different methods to provision configuration files? The first one is the redirection functionality that already existed before. Only now, it exists as a part of Patton Cloud. The idea here is that when a device connects for the first time, then it contacts our redirect server at redirect.patton.com. And that server looks up the device in a database to figure out which of the customer servers have the configuration file for that device. The redirect server then sends back an HTTP redirect to the device to tell it where it can download its configuration file. This is a very powerful but easy to implement method for doing provisioning on a remote server. And this method works for all smartware and Trinity devices. And this is the only method that works for all existing devices, whether smartware or Trinity. Our second method is that we have added to the Patton Cloud the possibility to provision a device to immediately connect to the cloud. This means that when the device first boots up and contacts our provisioning server, we send it a small configuration snippet that tells the device to connect to the customer's organization within Patton Cloud. For this to work, we require Trinity version 3.12 or later. And it also requires that the device has been produced in July 2018 or sometime after that. The final method is to provide configuration files directly to your devices from the cloud. No external configuration server is required. You store the configuration files in the cloud, and we send them to a device when that device connects for the first time. This again requires Trinity version 3.12 or later. Same as before, on the manufacturing date, the device has to have been produced in July 2018 or any time after that. This lesson covers the basic redirection service, the first method. The other provisioning methods we just mentioned come with the advanced and professional plans. We will cover those later in the course. Let's get started with a look at the redirection service. The basic idea with redirection is that when a customer orders a smart node and it then arrives at their premises, they register that device with the cloud. They log into the cloud user interface and register the device using its serial number. As we will see later, there are methods to bulk add a set of devices so that you don't have to add each device individually. Next, when the device is booted up for the first time, it contacts our redirect server at redirect.patton.com. with an HTTP GET request. And as you see, it sends the serial number with the request, so the Patton Cloud knows which device is asking for configuration. Patton Cloud then looks up to see which server the customer has specified as the place where the customer stores their configuration files. That part is something the customer has to already have set up. The cloud then sends a redirect message. For example, something like you see here, configs.example.com/patton/serial number of the device.cfg. This is a file that the device is instructed to download as its initial configuration. If the Patton device receives such a redirection message, it sends another GET request to that redirected to URL, and finally receives a 200 OK response together with the new startup configuration. After it receives its configuration, the last step the device performs is to reboot with this new startup config, and then the device is provisioned and has the configuration as desired by the customer. Okay, now let's see how this works in practice. So here we are within the cloud organization of Example Incorporated that we use for demos. I'm now playing the role of the administrator of that company. As you see down here, we have a provisioning menu item, which has two submenus. One is for setting up provisioning profiles, and the second one is a devices menu where you can assign devices to the different profiles that you create. Before we can start, let's create an initial profile which basically defines what should happen when a device contacts the provisioning server. So we create a new profile, we give it a name, redirect, because we want to test the redirection service. We give it a small description, redirect to the company TFTP server. It is enabled, and we also want to select this as the default profile. When selecting a profile as default, it means that all devices that are registered later are automatically assigned to that profile and will be provisioned according to whatever you have set up with that profile. The next step is to select a provisioning method. We want to choose Redirect to External Server. And then we want to enter the Redirect to URL. Now in this case, let's assume the configuration is on a TFTP server at this IP address, and we have the configuration stored in a Patton subfolder. And then each device gets its configuration from the file specified with a serial number placeholder and a .cfg extension. As you see here, you can use this placeholder to fill this with information received from the device. Down here is a list of all the placeholders that you can use. For example, the MAC address, serial number, the hardware major and minor number, the software major and minor number, and so on. So you can have different configuration files for different devices based on their serial numbers, but also different configurations based on the software version, for example, which you might want if you opt to upgrade and downgrade frequently. All right, we have set up our profile to redirect to the company TFTP server. Let's save that. And as you see, the profile is now enabled, and it is marked as the default profile. The next step is to go to the Devices menu here, where you see we already have some devices added. Now let's add some more. We click on Register New Devices, and we are asked to enter the serial numbers of those devices, or to select a file which contains the serial numbers. In this case, we received from Patton a list of serial numbers of 3 devices. Let's copy this and paste it in this section here. And then we can also select an existing provisioning profile and assign that as we register the devices. That's handy. Currently it's the redirect profile that is available, so we select that. And then we click on Register, which then adds those devices to our organization. And we can see down here the 3 devices that we just added. They are linked to the redirect profile, and they have the status of registered, which means that we have added them to the cloud, but they have not connected to it yet. Notice that all the existing devices are also using the redirect provisioning profile because we selected it as the default profile. So if a device is not explicitly assigned to a profile, then we will use the default. So there is a distinction between this label, redirect default, which means no profile was assigned, and the redirect label, which means that we explicitly selected that provisioning profile. You can change the assignment at any time by using this drop-down and then selecting a different profile. Now we have registered the 3 devices. Let's start one of them up and see what happens. Okay, as you can see, something happened. So the device booted up and contacted the redirect server as instructed by our shipping configuration. And you can see here that we have now successfully redirected it to the configuration server, and we have to assume that the device was able to download the configuration from there. Now, we cannot track that for sure, because what we do is just send back a redirection response, and we cannot follow up with what happens with the device after that, whether it could get the configuration from that server or not. Note also that there are 2 requests here. This is because the device has conditions set to try to download the configuration when the device comes up and when the NTP clock has been stabilized. And since both of these happen more or less at the same time, it sends 2 requests. We also see the last provisioning result for that device, which in this case was it successfully redirected about a minute ago. And we see from which IP address this request came from. We can click on the column here to go to the device view where you can see more provisioning information. We see the selected provisioning profile. We see the number of successful redirects. We see information about the last request. And we would see information about the last failure, but that has never happened so far. And we see a list of the last 10 requests with the date, the IP address, and the result of each provisioning request. So this is the method that we replicated from the old redirect server. The same functionality is available here. Now let's go back to our diagram and analyze what happens if the provisioning server is not within the company's private network, but instead is located outside on the public internet somewhere. In this case, the provisioning server has to be secured because an attacker could guess the serial number of a device or devices, and with this get information, the configurations of the devices that are stored on the provisioning server. So there are two methods to secure things. The first one is an extra step for the operator. In addition to registering the device with the Patton Cloud, the operator also has to execute a wizard on the device before connecting it for the first time, and that wizard is used to enter a username and a password, such that the first request then goes to the provisioning server with the provided username and password. And the provisioning server, for its part, has to be secured in such a way that it only allows valid usernames and passwords to retrieve a configuration. That is one approach. The second approach is, since July 2018, Patton now installs a certificate on every Patton device that is secured with the serial number of that device. So the common name of the certificate is the serial number of the device. So in this case, the provisioning server can be secured by checking, validating, whether the serial number in the certificate is equal to the serial number of the configuration file that is being requested. And if it is, only then does the provisioning server return the configuration file. Again, this only works with newer devices, as we just mentioned. Now, if all you have are newer such devices, then you can take advantage of that in your provisioning profile. Let's edit our redirect profile to see what we mean. What you see here below the provisioning method is a flag where we can tell the system that the device certificate is required. If we enable this feature, then the request from the device will only be forwarded to this URL if we receive a valid certificate from that device. And because this only works for newer models, this is disabled by default to make it backwards compatible with older devices. And there you go. This lesson has been all about the redirect feature of Patton Cloud. We mentioned two other provisioning methods at the beginning of this lesson that are available when you subscribe to the advanced or professional plans. We have a video lesson covering both of these methods coming up later in the course. And that concludes this lesson on the redirect feature of Patton Cloud. Thanks for watching.